She was just a quiet girl from a tiny town, nothing flashy, nothing loud. While others chased trends and attention, she walked around in worn shoes, a second-hand coat, and dreams that didn't seem to fit the world she lived in. Her name was Emily. She didn't have a big following or a famous family, but what she did have was something even more powerful: belief in herself. Even when no one else did, people laughed at her though. They said her ideas were too big, too strange. "You change the world?" they'd snicker. Even her own friends rolled their eyes when she talked about building something meaningful, something that would help people. To them, she was just the simple girl who baked cookies for the church or helped old Mrs. Gray carry groceries. But, to Emily, each of those tiny acts was part of something bigger. She just couldn't explain it yet. Her classmates became bankers, influencers, designers. She stayed behind. She worked late shifts, cleaned homes, took online classes on borrowed Wi-Fi, and filled notebooks with thoughts that no one ever read. But all along, she was quietly building something the world hadn't seen coming, and yet, for a long time, nothing seemed to change. The same people who laughed at her got ahead, while Emily's name was still unknown. 10 years passed. People forgot about the girl with the wild dreams. That is, until one morning, a headline went viral. A name that had once been dismissed and mocked was suddenly being spoken on global news, in boardrooms, in classrooms. The same people who once doubted her were now scrambling to understand how she did it. So, what happened in those 10 years? What did Emily create in the shadows while everyone else chased the spotlight? And how did the girl who had nothing but quiet determination go from overlooked to unforgettable? Emily's story didn't begin in some fancy office or spotlight stage. It started in the corner of a small town library where the heater barely worked and the internet was spotty. She used to sit for hours at the same wooden desk, scribbling down ideas in a hand-me-down notebook. While others saw her as a girl who didn't know how the real world worked, Emily saw problems no one else seemed to notice. She didn't dream of being famous, she dreamed of building solutions. Real ones, for real people, especially for the kind of folks who always got left behind. At 19, she had an idea that she couldn't shake. It started with something simple: how small communities could support themselves without depending on outside help. It sounded boring to most people, too local, too humble, but not to her. She saw potential where others only saw limits. She talked to farmers, teachers, moms running daycares out of their kitchens. She didn't pitch them an app or ask for investments, she listened. And the more she listened, the clearer her vision became. But being passionate didn't mean life got easier. Emily struggled. She was rejected from grants, laughed out of meetings, told over and over again that she needed to think bigger, be flashier, or look the part. One investor even told her, "You seem nice, but you're not exactly leadership material." That one stung. Still, she didn't quit. She worked overnight shifts at a grocery store, saved every penny, and used her weekends to build her first tiny pilot project. It was small, just a few neighbors working together to create a shared local marketplace, but it worked. Then came the hard part: scaling it, protecting it, and keeping it rooted in her values as more people started to notice. And not all of them had good intentions. Whispers started. People from outside the town came snooping around, trying to buy out her idea, twist it into something shiny and commercial. Some even tried to take credit for her work. But Emily had seen enough in those library hours and late night shifts to know how quickly something pure could be swallowed up by power and greed. And just when it seemed like her dream might finally break through, something happened. Something no one saw coming. And that's when everything changed. Emily barely slept anymore. Each morning she woke up to emails from lawyers, calls from journalists, and meetings with community members who were starting to lose faith. The copycat organization was growing fast. They had polished presentations, celebrity endorsements, and promises of expansion that sounded exciting to people who'd once believed in Emily's quieter, slower approach. And while she kept working from her little office with its flickering light and peeling paint, They were building glass-walled headquarters across town. Daniel grew distant too. He still cared, but he didn't understand why Emily wouldn't take the bigger offers. "This could be your shot," he said one night, frustration in his voice. "What's the point of building something if no one ever hears about it?" She looked at him, tired but steady. "They'll hear, but not like that." Still, the pressure kept rising. One evening, Emily found a letter slipped under her door, an official notice. The copycat group had filed a claim, accusing her of stealing their business model. It was a complete lie, but with their money and influence, they could make it look real. Emily's hands shook as she read it. She had nothing to hide, but defending herself meant hiring a legal team she couldn't afford. Her entire dream, 10 years of work, now dangled by a thread. And then came the town hall meeting. It was packed. The entire community showed up, curious, divided, tense. The mayor had invited both Emily and the competing organization to speak. She stood in the wings, her heart pounding, watching the other group's team take the stage in crisp suits and confident voices. They talked about scaling solutions, impact projections, and sustainable revenue. When it was her turn, the room was quiet. She walked up slowly, wearing the same cardigan she'd had since college, clutching a folder of handwritten notes. She didn't have slides. She didn't have a polished pitch. What she did have was the truth and a room full of people who had seen her sweep floors, deliver food to sick neighbors, and stand outside in the cold to help at local events. She looked at the crowd, then at Daniel, unsure if he was still on her side. And as she opened her mouth to speak, everything hung in the balance. Emily's voice trembled at first, but her words were clear. She didn't come with buzzwords or flashy promises, just stories, real ones, about the single mom who used the local marketplace to sell her homemade candles, or the retired teacher who found purpose mentoring young vendors. People started nodding. She spoke from the heart, not a business plan. The crowd leaned in, but just as the room seemed to shift in her favor, the unexpected happened. A man in the crowd stood up, someone Emily didn't recognize. He introduced himself as a representative from a tech investment firm. "I've been watching this situation closely," he said, "and I'd like to clarify something on the record." He held up a tablet. "Our team discovered that the core structure of the competing organization's model was directly lifted from Emily's original pilot documents, some even copied word for word." Gasps filled the room. The other team's spokesperson stiffened. Emily blinked, trying to process what was happening. The man continued. "We received a tip from someone inside their team, a whistleblower." This wasn't inspiration. It was theft. Everything turned. The confident faces on the opposing side fell silent. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel stood frozen, caught between shock and something else, guilt. Emily looked at him. And then she understood. He'd known. Maybe not at first, but at some point, he must have found out. He'd stayed quiet, hoping it wouldn't matter, or maybe thinking it would all work out in the end. And then came the second blow. The man from the firm wasn't just exposing the truth, he had a new offer. "Emily," he said, turning to her, "we want to fund your work, but under one condition: you sign over your rights. We'll keep your name attached, but we'll take it from here." The room went still again. It was the kind of offer that could shut down the copycats, silence the lawsuits, and flood her project with money. But it also meant losing control of everything she built, trading her quiet mission for something bigger but no longer hers. Now Emily faced a different kind of choice: walk away from everything she stood for, or risk losing it all by standing alone. The room was holding its breath. All eyes were on Emily as the offer hung in the air, millions of dollars, a chance to shut down the competition, protect her work, and finally breathe after 10 hard years. But it came with a price. Her voice, her vision, her freedom. She stared at the man from the firm, then slowly turned toward the community, the very people she'd built everything for. "I didn't start this to make money," she said quietly. "I started this because I saw people being left behind. I won't hand over their future just so mine can feel safer." There was silence at first. Then someone in the back clapped. Slowly, others joined. It wasn't loud, but it was real. Emily stepped away from the microphone, heart pounding, hands shaking. She knew what she just did. She'd said no to the easiest path, and now, she had no idea what would happen next. Then came the twist no. One expected. As she walked off stage, a woman in a green scarf caught her eye. She stood up and introduced herself as a representative from an international nonprofit focused on grassroots innovation. I was sent here to quietly observe, she said. We've been looking for real community-led projects that aren't driven by profit. You've created something rare and we'd like to support you fully. No strings. Emily's eyes widened. Why me? The woman smiled. Because you said no, the crowd erupted. The fake startup team quietly gathered their papers and slipped out. The town saw them for what they were now. Daniel stepped forward, face full of regret. I'm sorry, he said. I thought maybe if I just stayed out of the way, it would all work out. I was wrong, Emily nodded, hurt still there but softened by relief. She didn't say much, just looked at him and said, "Help me rebuild." Together, they walked out of the hall into the cool night air. Everything had changed, but not in the way most people expected. Emily didn't become famous for selling out. She became known for standing firm. And now, with honest backing and her community behind her, the world was finally listening for the right reasons. Over the next few months, everything started falling into place. With the support from the nonprofit and the town finally united behind her, Emily was able to grow her community project without giving up her values. She brought in local leaders, trained new teams, and created systems that made the marketplace stronger than ever but still deeply personal. There were no flashy rebrands, no empty slogans, just real work, helping real people. Daniel stayed by her side, this time for the right reasons. He stepped up, using his connections to help protect the project from future legal threats and making sure no one could ever steal her work again. Their friendship, once strained, grew stronger as they rebuilt trust brick by brick. He never tried to lead, he just showed up, listened, and supported. That meant more to Emily than any apology ever could. The competing company faded away. Once the truth came out and their copied plans were exposed, their reputation collapsed. Investors pulled out, their team disbanded, and just like that, what once felt like a giant threat became nothing more than a lesson. Emily's story began to spread again, but this time, it was on her terms. Schools invited her to speak. Communities across the country reached out, asking how they could start something similar. Her name was mentioned in places she never imagined, not because she chased fame, but because she built something real. Years later, people would still remember her as the simple woman who was laughed at for dreaming too big, but she never forgot who she was. No fancy title, no perfect spotlight, just Emily, the girl who believed in something when no one else did. And maybe that's the real takeaway. In a world that moves fast and chases loud voices, sometimes the quiet ones carry the strongest vision. Emily didn't need to change who she was to change the world. She just needed to keep going. So, the next time someone tells you your dream is too small, too slow, or too different, think of Emily. Because sometimes the world doesn't notice at first, but when it finally does, it remembers forever.